Is there a reason I was seeing everyone mash normal buttons during neutral in Super Turbo? Ah, okay. That is a fun question. Is that just an ST thing?
Hey people, hope you guys are having a wonderful day. Today I want to go over a hotly contested term that is often misused within the FGC, and a term that I don't think anyone really understands, not even me, if you know what I mean, and that is footsies. I want to explain my own confusion and everyone's confusion about what footsies is and where we were at in terms of the fighting game lexicon. So first of all, I want to go over like the origins of footsies. Where did the term come from? Why is it called that? Etc. You know, by understanding where the term comes from and why it was first used, perhaps we can get a better understanding of it.
Neutral and footsies in SF5, the game where you can't even like, it's almost impossible to whiff punish shit. It's in the most offensive game in the world. You can't even react to dashes. There already is things in that game that just say fuck neutral. Yeah, it's mostly come to the understanding that like there is no Street Fighter game that has honest footsies. Honest footsies is a lie and essentially a fantasy created by the fighting game community.
So first of all fighting games start off with Street Fighter 2. It was basically the biggest fighting game of all time. Basically all fighting games are derivative to some extent from Street Fighter 2 to an extent. So the term comes from Street Fighter 2, and it comes from this move here. Now, you look at what's happening here. Ryu is extending out his foot somewhat suggestively towards his opponent. The reason why footsies is called footsies is because of this move and the properties that it used to hold in Street Fighter 2.
Against Dalsim, get as close as possible and throw low short kicks. Here's what happens when Dalsim tries to attack. Dalsim's only alternative is to drill, but if he tries that, counter with a hurricane kick.
That was an old video released by Capcom of tactics to use Ryu. Ryu has sort of always been the pinnacle of footsies. The character is all about footsies. It's literally named after him. Before we go into the greater scope of things, I want you to understand like Ryu's game plan and space control in general. So I have another little video here for you.
Controlling space. Street Fighter 2 has a 2D playfield with no sidestepping, so controlling space in the playfield really limits the opponent's ability to move and attack. They've got to figure out a way to get around fireballs, for example. Let's look at the game with some rectangles overlaid to see which space is being controlled. This large horizontal rectangle represents the amount of space Ryu controls with his fireball. Look at how much of the playfield it takes up. The opponent's going to have to figure out some way to get around that. This other vertical slanted rectangle represents the space that Ryu controls with his Dragon Punch. So if you jump over one of his fireballs at the wrong time, he'll be able to Dragon Punch you out of the air. This is his basic gameplay, and you can see that it's so effective because so much of the playfield is under Ryu's control.
And how that relates to his crouch light kick is that this is like sort of a super fast fireball at the end of the day. It's a super fast poke, and what is a fireball at the end of the day but a poke? So they would have to somehow find a way to navigate past this light kick. And it wasn't like what it was today. This went really far. A lot of the cast didn't have dancing poke that hit mid that would get around this in the cast. So this could become a very powerful threat, especially in the corner, because it controlled so much space. So in Street Fighter 2 specifically, when you did attacks, you would have sort of warped hitboxes. So when I'm like sitting down here, crouching, doing this crouch light kick, attacks would go over my head, if you know what I mean. Like when I did this, my hurt box would be like halved. Attacks would go over my head. We still have that, but not in the same extent as it was in Street Fighter 2. And the properties of these attacks in Street Fighter 2 were a lot different, you know? So like this would be like 2 frames. So, and it would have like a frame recovery. So you could just spam this and it would come out like lightning fast, right? And what it would do is give you sort of a better idle hitbox. So if someone tries to approach, they would have to get past the max length of that kick, because movement wasn't that great in Street Fighter 2. You couldn't do drive rush, you couldn't do a lot of unique moves, and like Tatsu would go overhead, as we all know. Tatsu doesn't hit crouching, so this sort of dominated a lot of people's approaches, because they would have to walk up or fireball or sort of try and get around it, if you know what I mean.
Is there a reason I was seeing everyone mash normal buttons during neutral in Super Turbo? Okay. That is a fun question. Is that just an ST thing? A lot of fighting games have become with punish games, whereas in the old days, a lot of games are hitbox-based neutral. So I've talked about this a lot. Like, you'll hear me say the terms hitbox-based neutral or, with punish-based neutral. Like when New Generation came out, the original Street Fighter 3, the very first tournament out Golfland, I got to grand finals against Vae with my Alex, and he played Ryu, and all he did was do standing roundhouse with Ryu, and I couldn't beat him. I died. Like, he just like roundhouse, and he's like, James can't stop this. Obviously, this is the first tournament for Street Fighter 3 at Southern Hills Golfland, so we didn't know much about pairing and, how to utilize all these things and blah, 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 blah. I just got smoked by that because I would stick out a button, get hit, stick out a button and get hit, and I couldn't do anything. And that's because Third Strike became more of a with punish neutral game than a hitbox neutral game. What I'm used to is the games like Super Turbo, where you don't whiff punish other people's buttons. Again, Chun-Li's crouching medium kick has better frame data than most light attacks in fighting games today, right? Zangief's standing light kick has 0 recovery frames. The last frame of Zangief's standing light kick is an active frame, right? It wasn't about whiff punishing. You could whiff punish certain moves, like Guile's crouching medium kick is kind of famous for being one of the whiff punishable moves, but in general, whiff punishing wasn't something that you focused on. Instead, what you focused on was hitbox fight. You found moves that beat the other person's move. That's how it worked. For example, I always use the shotos versus Zangief as one of the primary examples here. If Ryu just goes crouching light kick all day like this, Zangief can't walk up and SPD him very well, etc., etc. The only thing Zangief can really do in that game is use standing medium kick, because the way that standing medium kicks, hitbox, and hurtboxes are designed is that it would go over the light kick and be just long enough to kick the shotos from right outside of the crouching light kick range. So if they were doing crouching short all the time, I would just throw out a standing medium kick and kick him in the face, right? And so like, oh no. And then if the shotos don't know anything else, they're gonna have trouble in this match.
Specifically, this situation here, like when the opponent was in the corner, you control so much space. You would control so much space with this crouch light kick. You would have so much invulnerability. It would be called the San Francisco Footsies. Now, this is where the term comes from. This partially goes into the Street Fighter 2 was a much different game than what we have now in Street Fighter 6. Part of the original design of a shoto was that their attacks would not hit crouching. So all of the cast of Street Fighter 2, all of them would have really great mids that would hit you crouching. And part of what made Ryu and Ken unique was that they had no mids that weren't crouching. Because like crouching, like they would get mids, but what do you have to do to crouch is stop your momentum. So like part of the design of a shoto was that they couldn't walk forward and poke you. This faraway light kick wouldn't be added until Turbo, and this is all Ryu would get. Ken would end up getting all of these crazy kicks and stuff like that, And that was part of what set Ryu apart from Ken, is that Ken had better mids than Ryu, but Ryu had better low and high pressure. When you start thinking about that like how characters are so different from what they were, like that was the DNA of a show, highs and lows and bad mids. And this is why like people say Kazuya is a shoto, because in Tekken he has great highs and lows but bad mids. So it's more than just that he does karate. But other than that though, like part of what would make a shoto and like part of what Ryu was all about was getting into a range where you could use this good invulnerability and these good standing normals that didn't have any forward minimum to sort of check the opponent. And if you're doing this, they can't approach you. As I said, like the walk speed and stuff like that, to get past this was such an insurmountable task for most of the cast.
Look, back in the day, it was not normal. Like, now, of course, if this was fucking Street Fighter 6, we know that would fucking hit you, because everything fucking hits you ducking. Like, just think about what a simple thing like that is. Back in the original Street Fighter 2, it was rare to have pokes, standing pokes, that could hit you crouching, ducking, whatever you want to say. Ducking low was kind of your sweet spot because there were no overheads yet, right? So to actually poke with a lot of characters, guess what? We had to do low attacks. What the fuck? Are you serious? Do you mean Footsies is actually exactly what it looks like? Standing attacks didn't all hit you ducking back in the day, okay?
Not only did standing attacks not hit crouching, it didn't move you forward. Part of this as well is that now the identity of this sort of check character in Ryu is sort of neutered to an extent because of this move here. Because why would you want to sit here and poke? Because all of these lows have terrible priority to this. This just ignores everything.
What you learn then is that crouching strong for shotos have a really high priority, what we used to call priority, right? Which now I define as the amount of overlap of hurt boxes to your hit boxes. So crouching strong for the shotos have really small hurt boxes compared to their hit boxes. So actually, let me see if I can actually find pictures of this. Oh my god, holy crap, this move has good priority. Holy crap, oh my god. Like, this kind of move would be like if people saw this move today, like, people would be so angry and call for nerfs, okay? There is no hurt box on his arm at all. Like, it's almost kind of silly. I mean, look at this thing, dude. Like, look at this. Like, there's no hurt box on it at all. This is why this move we used to call had high priority, because that's what we referred to as priority. So in other words, if Zangief threw out the standing medium kicks, he would lose to this button all the time, right? So yeah, if you look at Zangief here, you know, he would lose because this blue box would actually get hit. It would lose to this because it would just get hit and not be able to reach far enough. And so Zangief would lose in this situation. But if you are a Zangief player worth their salt, you would end up using crouching roundhouse. It just has a really good range here, right?
So am I saying that Footsies no longer exists? No, I'm not saying that priority no longer exists. Just the whole ducking aspect of Street Fighter is gone. So, example, he was doing like a crouching move there, and this, what used to be a high, is now just a mid. And it's like the most rewarding mid ever. I'm not saying everything's a mid, but almost everything is pretty much a mid now. Now, does Footsies no longer exist? Am I saying it's all doom and gloom? No, there are still avenues in which Footsies still remain. And I'm going to go over some of it. In one aspect, anti-airs is an element of Footsies, as well as invincibles, as well as power armor. So Say, for example, your drive impact. That's an element of footsies. It takes priority over most moves, etc. And if you time it right, you get a full counter, etc. Another element is medium DP. This is an anti-air, and it's immune to jump ins. So you get sort of priority and invincibility to jump ins. Obviously, there's the EX DP, which is invincible, and that will go through anything. And invincible DPs are an element of footsies. They're priority punishing. Another element of footsies is obviously low evasive attacks, like Tatsu, stuff like that. That's going to go over low attacks. And we got like this sort of move here, which will go over light forward, etc. So I'm going to use another game for an example for special moves. Obviously, special moves are part of footsies as well. Fireballs, you know, you might not think they have any invulnerability, but at the end of the day, they're sort of a very long poke at the end of the day. So they're like a long foot. So let's say I record my buddy doing that. So my fireball is going to prioritize over his little blazing knuckle thing. So that is a way that like fireballs go into something. Some things are fireball invulnerable, some things have fireball evasion, etc. So closing statements about Fatal Fury though is the interesting thing that they have is high invincible moves. Despite most of the games being mid, this allows you to dodge some of the more high reaching animations, which is interesting, but it's still very confusing, I would say, and these moves have very bad data in general. Now, I wanted to make some closing statements. I could be commenting on Tekken and how that has greater footsies than any of the games, or I could start talking about how Smash has better footsies than most Street Fighter games, but I want to make some closing statements. I want to explain what footsies is, what is good footsies, what is footsies trying to describe, so we can all come away from this with a lesson learned, you know? And I'm sure, like, no matter what I say from this point on, someone's going to rudely tell me down in the comments I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about and I am a fraud. But let's have a go with it. So footsies is a term used to describe the space control that Ryu had in Street Fighter 2 with his crouch light kick. What is footsies? What is it trying to describe? Footsies is trying to describe controlling space and using the priority of your character's moves to get hits in. So when someone has good footsies, they understand good space control and how to read their opponent and check them with moves with high priority. And that is what footsies is. I hope everyone comes away from this with enlightenment and relief after this information has received them, and not anger. Please comment down below what you think I got wrong, or if you would like more content like this explaining the more intricate reasonings as to how we all got here, if you know what I mean. But how do we get here? Yeah, how do we get to the point where people think footsies is just neutral? Well, the thing is we all have like unreliable narrators in the world and bad actors. Philology, the study of words is very much dense with this. There's words in this world that no longer have any meaning, like fascist, for example, which is a term that's like so used to the point that even in academia it's hard for anyone to define it, and there's very few people that have ever been able to define it. So that's where we are. Like, Footsies is the FGC's fascism at the end of the day. If you know what I mean. You can take that away as well. But yeah, I hope you guys all had a fun time. I had a fun time making this, and let me know what you guys think. Hope you have a wonderful day.